Hello everyone and welcome to our HUB24 webinar today. I'm Lydia Pearson, State Manager for VIC at HUB24. And today we're excited to show you our new Present feature recently released on Advisor Hub. This is a really cool feature that's going to save time for you, the advisor, by bringing together the data you need to have simple and engaging conversations with your clients. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Leah Winterton, our Head of UX and Product Design, who developed this new capability and will take you on a tour of Present in this session. I've got to tell you, Leah, the feedback I've had so far has been fantastic and already making an impact. So let's jump into it. Leah, how did we get here?
Thanks, Lilia, and hello, everybody. Well, it has been really exciting, and I think it's the process that we went through. And what we did about 18 months ago, we launched a project to review our reporting capability overall. And the first thing we did was we went out and spoke to advisors. We spoke to about 10 different groups of various sizes. And the first question we always asked was, when do you need to use reports? And the first answer from every single person we spoke to was to prepare for a client meeting, amongst other things, but that was always the first answer. So what we decided to do is delve into that process. What's involved with preparing for a client meeting, and what is it that you take to the client? What do you show them? And what we discovered was quite a big problem across the board. And essentially what people were doing were taking reports and doing a lot of manual work in between before getting to that presentation. It was taking as long as up to 12 hours for some groups to prepare, depending on the client. They would have teams either in their offices, sometimes overseas, taking data, rekeying it into spreadsheets, producing charts and visualizations that they thought their client would understand, and then reformatting that until it was ready for the advisor to show their client. So that meant, nice big numbers, visualizations, and a story. So very much taking them through the investment story to help them understand their investments before they could get on with the rest of the meeting. So they all told us, this is a really big problem. It's really time consuming, and we don't think there's anything out there in the market that does this. So when I took this research back to HUB24, we talked about, sure, we need to update and enhance our reports, and we still do plan to do that. But what if we could actually skip that whole preparation process, produce the presentation itself? And so that's how we came to Present. And we were absolutely determined to shave significant time off the preparation process. But also, obviously, very important was to produce a really interesting and engaging presentation. So we designed it very closely with advisors, and we kept iterating on that feedback, including taking that to some of their clients to make sure that they were also really happy with the result.
Awesome. That's probably the biggest feedback, Leah, in terms of getting client reporting and making it simple and making it client friendly, because reports can be bulky and really clunky. So really interesting to see what you've got to show us today.
Okay, great. So the first thing I'm going to show you is where and how you access Present. So there are two ways to access it. Up in our quick links at the top here, you can choose Present, or you can go to the portfolio dashboard, and at the moment we've got a button showing new on there so that you can easily find this new feature. So you can select one or more accounts from an account group and open Present, and that same account group will be launched on the page. Now, the first thing you can do is at the top of the page, we've got a selection of templates that we've deliberately designed for different styles of clients and different styles of advisors. And there's a snapshot, which I will show you at the end of the demo, a portfolio update, and one that's more designed to your super clients. So we're going to choose that one today. And this can be used for any client. You're not stuck with that title anywhere in your presentation. It's just a way of you differentiating them. So as I've already said, you can select one or more accounts. So that's a huge benefit of Present. Now you have consolidated reporting across every topic. So at the top here, we've got the slides that you can take you through the presentation, just like you would at a meeting agenda, but you can always switch around the order as you speak with your client, and the conversation can take you in different directions. It's all here ready for you, ready to go. But let's talk about how we first customize and personalize the presentation. So on the front page, we've got a group of settings divided up into your cover page settings, your investment settings, performance and benchmark settings. The cover page settings changes your front page, so you can personalize this. So it might be a quarterly review or an annual review. So we're going to call that here the annual review. And then you can name your client. So, and you can be as personalized as you like for this. So let's talk about Jane and Rob. And what I'll show you as we progress through, where you'll also see that client name. Here we've got the date range. And so you can default that to whatever you like. It defaults to the end date of yesterday, and 12 months too. But let's take that back 12 months, just because we're in a demo environment. And from here, you can choose a number of different periods, but we'll start with 12 months and I'll show you how you can change that throughout the presentation. So that's our cover page setup. And from there, we've got investment settings. Now these settings relate to both the asset allocation and the investment slide. So I'm going to wait until I get to those to explain those settings in a bit more detail, just so they make more sense to you. And just close that there. Then our performance settings. So this is where Present gets really powerful. So we've got a couple of options in here, whether to report performance after fees only, before and after, or before fees only. And this will derive the behavior of charts as well as our table of performance numbers. Whether or not you want to include franking credits, so let's do that in this case. And also whether you want to include foreign withholding tax. Now the reason that one's there is those amounts can be substantial depending on the client. So if the client will get those back, then you can include those in the returns. I'm just going to leave those out for now. We've also got an option here to show volatility. Now we follow the GIPS recommendations for volatility calculations, so it can be a useful statistic for risk indicators, but it's only applicable, the GIPS standards recommend that it's only applicable for periods more than 3 years. So your HUB24 accounts need to be at least older than 12 months, 3 years for that calculation to display. So I'm going to leave that off for today. Now you can come back at any time, because that's the beauty of Present. The slides, you can come backwards and forwards. The data is live and it's real time. So you can do all of this in front of your client without losing any data or time. So that's our bench performance, and then we get on to benchmarks. So we've got a number of options here. The first being a portfolio objective. So we've got all of the market indexes here, or a range of them, plus we've got the option of CPI and absolute return. So that would be if you're targeting a fixed percentage. So let's choose that in this case. We can target 5% per annum. Now you can target any percentage here. We're not locking you into specific numbers. So I'm going to do 5%. Whether or not you want to display in a table of returns the variance, so the actual portfolio return, how much it's outperformed, hopefully, our portfolio objective of 5%. And then you may also want to compare those returns with, for example, one of the Morningstar strategies or a market index. So let's, in this case, compare with the balanced target allocation. So now that we've set up our settings, we're ready to go. And the first thing we have here in the presentation template we've chosen is a table of contents, so a bit like an agenda, and a summary of the accounts that we're including in our presentation. Now, this is the only place you'll see a per account row. The rest of the presentation is consolidated. But remember, at any time you can deselect accounts and reselect them, and the data will be returned to the presentation.
So it's completely dynamic, Leah.
That's right. So it's all of your data on the HUB24 platform. We're querying real time. Yeah, so it's live.
Awesome.
Now, a big part of the feedback is clients just want to tell me the top levels at, the very high level at the beginning before delving into any of that detail that you normally see in tabular reports. They just want to know, how much has their portfolio changed in value and what happened in that period. So in this case, we've got our return and how we went from our starting to our closing value. And then we can see that progress over time. Now, in this template, super details, we actually have two things. We've got the change or the value or the total value of the 3 accounts over time. and also the net amount invested. So from the starting value of just over $2 million, what did they withdraw and add over time relative to how the portfolios changed in value? So that's a really powerful way to illustrate the fact that the portfolio is still in front, even though they've drawn down throughout the period. So then it's on to telling the story. So how did we get from here to here? And that's when we break it down. So this chart, the waterfall chart, we found was a really popular chart to illustrate all of the different activity that happens between your opening and your closing value. So what the net of the additions and withdrawals was, the investment growth for the period, your income, your fees, and here we've got an internal and movements amount. And I'll explain each of these, but the beauty of this is, for some clients, this is enough. Others may say, well, what was that additions and withdrawals? And so from here, you can drill down and get a summary of the different types of transactions that happened in the period that made up that amount. And so in this case, looks like we had a tax refund and a series of pension payments. And even then, if something looks, they might have a question or, did I contribute something? I'm sure I did. You can drill down into the transactions themselves, so it actually sees all of the underlying transactions that made up that summary. So really easy, quick way to access the data. You don't have to have all that printed on hand, ready for the meeting. Our growth, we show the breakdown of all the investments in the portfolio by growth. So that total investment growth for the period 12 months to August. The income, you can see the income as well as our franking credit amounts and any of the foreign withholding tax amounts deducted in the period. And we can also drill down onto the fees. So you get a summary of the fees by each type of fee. And lastly, the internal movements. Now we get a few questions about this amount. And what this is, internal movements are usually all of the buys and the sells, corporate actions, and things that usually net to zero, but occasionally you will get a corporate action that doesn't net to zero, and so we see that amount here, which is a small amount. And you can drill down into that to see what that is. So we've told our story of how we got to here, and then we can move into the more technical aspects of the portfolio. The things that often some clients may not understand easily. And so that's the whole objective of Present, is to make it easier to tell that story. And that's why we ended up with this chart here. Rather than show each of the asset classes, this language is something that's easy to understand in terms of the risk profile and what type of strategy has been put in place. So the more risky growth assets relative to our defensive assets and the other assets remaining. Now, again, all of this information you can drill down into as you need to. So we've divided our assets in growth, defensive, other. And from here, you can drill down into the consolidated holdings across the whole group and see those underlying holdings. Now, one of the things we've done here is simplify the pending transactions. So rather than see different lines for cash reserve, etc., we see one line for pending transactions, which are made up of unsettled amounts, your income receivable, and your application money or your cash reserve. So this is where I'm just going to explain the cover page settings because it's relevant here. Now, this asset allocation at the moment is being reported for managed funds, the primary asset class only. So that's clearly stated down here. So what that means is if, for example, we've got a managed fund that's in Australian equities as well as cash, but it's 90% Australian equities, 10% cash, all of the value of that managed fund is being reported under Australian equities. Now that's off the back of feedback that for some advisors and their clients, that cash component is confusing, and so they want to see it all under the Australian equities. But we didn't want to take away the flexibility of both options, and that's when you can change the asset allocation method here on the front screen or slide and choose primary asset class only, which is our default, or you can look through down into the underlying investments, and that will then break it out into each of the component asset classes. We've also got an option here, breakdown pending transactions. So that breaks out that single line into each of the components. So if we go back here again, our asset class is now allocation method is explained down the bottom here in our footnote. We're now looking through to the underlying asset classes. And when we go through to the consolidated holdings, at the end here, we'll see the breakdown of those pending transactions. So it's made up of income receivable and also some unsettled transactions. So that's our asset allocation. And then we get on to our consolidated performance. So all of those options that we set up at the beginning are now covered in this slide. So we've got consolidated performance chart across the 3 accounts. So again, at any time, you can say, let's just look at the pension accounts performance, and our chart and our returns period will update. If we bring them back in again to see the consolidated view across that for the family, and you can also change the date range, and that will instantly update it as well. So of course, and I feel for all the advisors out there, it's been a terrible few 6 months or 8 months now. It's important to be able to change that time period back to from inception and provide that long-term perspective. And so that updates live on your presentation. And we can see here that the portfolio over the long term is outperforming our portfolio objective of 5%. We're just under that balanced target allocation. And down here on our table, so we chose to report only returns after fees. So there's one line there. We entered a portfolio objective, an absolute return of 5% per annum. So that's that line, and then that that target in there. Now, if we change that to CPI, which I'm just going to do for you so you can see that. CPI plus 5%. That line there will change to CPI plus 5%, and so will our chart, and you'll see that in brackets. We then see a variance, so whether or not the portfolio return has beaten the objective, and then our other index, and you can choose up to 2 indexes there. Down the bottom in the footnotes, you'll see all of the other options you've chosen, whether or not to include franking credits, whether it's net of foreign withholding tax. And also you'll see down the bottom the performance inception date, which is probably very small on your screens, but remember to look at those footnotes if you've sort of got questions about what's included or not included. So then if we change that back to 12 months, we can move on to our investments. Now, the investments slide has been divided into 2 groups of types of investments, our managed portfolios and direct investments. So direct investments is anything outside of the managed portfolios. It's designed to help tell that story. If you are moving your clients more into managed portfolios, you can compare the periods. So for example, right now, this is what we've got. Let's look at 12 months ago. In his case, it hasn't changed that much, but you may show that shift in percentages for the period. We can move forward to today. And then you've got down here for direct investments, we've got by the investment type. Now, Present is designed to have content fit on a slide. So we don't show detailed tables. And this is where the reports are very important. If you want that detail, that's what complements Present. And you can print a tabular report. But for some accounts, they may only have a handful of direct investments together with their managed portfolios. So let's just say we're looking at the trust here. We can go back to the cover page and choose investment settings, breakdown, direct investments, yes. Excuse me, just needed some water. And that will show all of the investments line by line. Now in this case, they've got a little bit too many to fit onto a slide. Our pension account, however, has less. One of these has less. And that's all fitting here on one slide. So this fits neatly on a slide. And then of course, importantly, where do we see the managed portfolio detail? And that's when you can drill down and see all of the underlying detail in your managed portfolio by the asset class. So all of the holdings in there. And that's there for each of the managed portfolios. And if there's a sub-portfolio within a portfolio, you'll be able to drill down even further from inside here. That's our investments. And finally, the last part of that conversation may be to talk about your additions and withdrawals. And to see those pension payments as we covered earlier in the breakdown, and to be able to drill down. Now this slide here will show also whether you've got concessional or non-concessional contributions for your accumulation accounts, and each of the types of those contributions will be listed here in the summary. And you can also, again, you can go back to, for example, 3 years to date. If that's important for the contributions, you'll be able to see those all on the slide. At the back here, we've kept all of the busy wording and definitions. It's all here ready to go, so that you can get check on anything that was included, but also any questions about, what does that word internal movements mean, for example, that's covered here. Fees, just important to note that in Present, all fees are included in your after fees return, whereas some reports on the platform, we don't include, for example, advisor fees. So all of that clarity is covered in this page. So at the end of the meeting, you've finished your what we call the investment story. You can always export that to PDF and give that to the client. And it may be that you don't want to give your client the entire presentation. You may want to use one of our other presentations. So a snapshot, for example, has less content in it. And this may also be a format that you want to use. And so you can go through and see a smaller cut down version, a table of data there. And so that format might be more suitable to you and your client, and more suitable to PDF. So that covers off the demo. Now you can see here a logo. That's one of the biggest requests we've had since launching, and then we're definitely working on that and how that that will be exported to PDF. So that'll be coming in the coming weeks. What else is coming next in terms of feedback? We're looking at the idea of setting a goal in our cover slide for the progress slide. So being able to set a retirement goal and give that a label so that it appears in your chart as well. For asset allocation, next quarter we will be releasing a feature for you to be able to set your own labels and override the asset class for individual holdings. So for example, common pain point is hybrid securities. You'll be able to override the asset classes that they appear under. For example, you may want to put all of them under Australian equities, or you might want to change them to 50-50 Australian equities and fixed interest. So you'll be able to do that. We'll also be introducing the ability to set up buckets. So if you use the bucket strategy for your clients, we'll have a new presentation specifically for that purpose, where you will see your investments divided into the buckets, and you'll be able to create those labels yourself. So that can be long-term, medium-term, short-term, for example. We'll also be working on investment performance and asset class performance. And of course, one of the other big pieces of feedback that we've been receiving is how can we save these cover settings and make them customizable for your client? So if we go back to the portfolio update, for example, you may want to save some settings specific to your pension accounts. So to be able to set those up, and every time you come to this client for a meeting, they'll be there ready for you to use straight away. And likewise, it might be the consolidated view that you have different settings for. And over time, our ultimate vision is it's always going to be to cut down that time that it takes to present for a meeting, as well as, to prepare for a meeting, but also to be able to add more customization and personalization. So that might be being able to add some extra personalized text, market commentary, for example, all those sorts of things. And that's what we're continuously exploring. And I think, what's been fantastic is how much people are using this feedback button. So from here, any ideas, we're looking at them all the time, and that's driving the priorities for our roadmap.
I was going to raise that, Leah, in terms of how do we get feedback too. This is really important because we've built this basically on direct feedback from our advisors. So this is great. Yeah, exactly. And I can't emphasize enough how much we really do listen. And all of that feedback is consolidated into, okay, what's most important to do next? And so all of those things I just mentioned are all off the back of feedback. Awesome. Thanks so much, Leah. That's been an awesome demonstration of what Present can deliver for advisors. I'd like to thank everyone for attending our webinar today. Thank you, Leah. That was fantastic. Really appreciate it.
And thank you to all those users that have passed in the feedback too. It's just been invaluable.
Absolutely. If you'd like to hear more about Present, please contact your BDM. We'd be more than happy to talk to you and show you what it can do. Thanks again for being with us today.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.